Bakhmut Crisis, Russian Vuhledar Disaster, the Russian invasion of Ukraine by Kings in General. Let's go. Also, we are doing this whole series in advance over on the Patreon. So if you want to watch more episodes of this series, head over to the Patreon. That link's in the description box down below.
The much anticipated Russian grand offensive has probably begun. Russia has been putting pressure on the Ukrainian defenders on the North Luhansk front, around Vuhledar, and different sections of the Donbass front, while continuing to grind through the Ukrainian defenses around Bakhmut. This seems like a make-or-break moment for the Russian army in Ukraine, as if they fail to gain anything meaningful from this offensive, they will lose the initiative to Ukraine, which is preparing for its own offensive sometime in spring. Welcome to our video on the updates from the Russian invasion of Ukraine from the first half of February. There have also been worldwide
February
changes
2023,
reaching far beyond Ukraine's borders and into our own lives. Russia further cut its oil output below. As usual, let's first look at the developments on the battlefield. In this period, there has been heavy action on all fronts but the Kherson front. On the Zaporizhian front, Russia continued stubbornly sending its 40th and 155th Naval Infantry Brigades on frontal assaults on Vuhledar, leading to horrible losses on their side. The 72nd
So what, even more losses than the previous videos, or is that the same?
Have fire control over the road leading to Vuhledar from Pavlivka and Mikilska, allowing the Ukrainian artillery to have easy targets. According to a Ukrainian military official, Ukraine destroyed 136 Russian vehicles, including 36 tanks, within a week.
But that was...
Footage confirms that the Russian...
Okay, so I'm going to come back to the footage bit, because I was about to say, if that's the Ukrainians' reports, we do need to keep in mind that both sides are going to inflate numbers, and that we should only really focus on the visual losses that we can count from satellite imagery. Obviously, if you can count X amount of points have been taken, or X amount of storage units have been destroyed, or X amount of vehicles have been destroyed, that's what you can count. But independent reporting, I think, is a bit sus on both sides.
Because obviously both sides want to support their cause. But the Ukrainian sources report that Russia is bringing reinforcements to the Zaporizhia front, including the greater Mariupol area, which currently hosts around 30,000 Russian soldiers. So we may speculate that Russia will continue targeting Vuhledar. After months of defending its lines along the PO7 and P66 highways on the North Luhansk front, Russia has finally launched its own attack here. The Russians have been amassing reinforcements in this area and are currently pushing to advance on Liman, Kupiansk, Bilohorivka and other areas. On the northern section of this front, elements of the 4th Guards Tank Division and the 61st Naval Infantry Brigade reportedly pushed back the Ukrainian 67th Mechanized Brigade to capture Dverichna on February 4th. In the Nevska-Makivka section, the 144th Motor Rifle Division and the 76th Guards Air Assault Division have made some progress around Makivka at the beginning of the month. The Russian sources claim that the same units have gained ground towards Terny and Yampolivka. Around the same time, other elements of the 76th Guards Air Assault Division, BAR's infantry battalions, and regular Russian units pushed back the Ukrainian 95th Air Assault Brigade in the forest area around Kremina.
Oh, they got it!
Bilohorivka was also
around
under
it,
intense
so they weren't
pressure
able to get that
LPR
fog of
Second
war
Army
area,
Corps
which
and
was 2
BAR's
episodes
battalions
ago.
in this period. But despite Russian claims, this town is still under Ukrainian control.
So even though they had that many battalions there,
Ukrainian defenses are holding their ground, but the Russian offensive on the North Luhansk front has not yet reached its culmination. They still have more forces in reserve, and will look to advance on Kupiansk to the north to push the Ukrainians to the west bank of the Oskil River, and on a line between Makivka and Bilohorivka to threaten the Ukrainian control over important areas like Liman and Seversk. But the Donbass front remains the main focus of the Russian army.
So we still, like they're saying about the goals that they want to achieve, but it's still from throughout this whole series, I've been saying it's a slogfest. They're not getting any gains. It's just, there's not that much advantage on it. The Ukrainians got quite a nice advantage in the last push they had, but it just still seems like such a slogfest compared to previous wars.
Following the capture of Soledar in January, the Russian army, spearheaded by Wagner mercenaries, continued expanding its area of control around Soledar. On February 1st, the Wagner units occupied the minuscule village of Sako Ivantseti. The following day, they captured Mykolaiivka, but their advance north of the TO513 highway was somewhat stalled in the areas around Rodolivka and Fedorivka by the 10th Separate Mountain Assault Brigade and its 109th Battalion. South of Soledar, on February 12th, Wagner announced the capture of Krasnohora, coming ever closer to reaching the junction of the TO513 and MO3 highways. The last hurdle for them is Paraskevivka. If they manage to capture it, they would completely cut the supply line to Bakhmut through the MO3 highway, which is currently under Russian fire control. There is also a risk of encirclement of Ukrainian units defending Paraskevivka, including the 30th Mechanized Brigade and a pro-Ukrainian Chechen battalion, if the Russians capture the section of the MO3 highway west of Paraskevivka.
Gotta give those YouTubers their money.
Immerses you in a universe.
West of Bakhmut, the 60th and 63rd Mechanized Brigades have successfully prevented Wagner from capturing Ivanivska and taking the TO504 highway, the last remaining relatively safe supply line to Bakhmut under control. On February 14th, they even managed to push Wagner away from the highway.
There we go, nice
Heavy fighting is also ongoing in Bakhmut, where Wagner is making incremental advances. But Bakhmut is still under Ukrainian control, which Prigozhin confirmed. Bakhmut will not be taken soon. Heavy fighting is also happening in Mariinka and the Avdiivka section, but there have not been any significant changes in this period. For now, Ukraine is standing its ground in Bakhmut, and from the looks of it, they have chosen to bleed out Wagner and other units fighting in the city to complicate any further Russian advance on the Donbass front. Ukraine will fight in Bakhmut until their encirclement becomes imminent. Wagner has succeeded in advancing.
It's quite entertaining to me, because obviously when you're the defending force, 9 times out of 10 it is about outlasting the invading force. But throughout history there's been time and time again that Russia is usually the force being invaded, and then due to the fact of their large numbers, they're able to outlast their opposition. Therefore, they end up turning towards the end of the confrontation, end up winning. But it's a surprise that in this scenario, Russia was the one that needed to roll over, and you would have thought they would have been able to because of the size of Ukraine and the Ukrainian military arms at the point in time of the invasion was so low. Yet they weren't able to do it, and now they're basically being put into a position where they've won from time and time again throughout history, and they're not able to sort of counteract that, even though they've been in that position themselves time and time again. It's kind of ironic and funny to me.
Donbass front, but their tactics are extremely costly for their manpower. In a video posted on February 16th, a Wagner medic says that the mercenaries are losing hundreds of men every day. According to a Russian source, Wagner sends its assault groups of 8 to the contact line to reveal Ukrainian positions, no matter the cost. Usually it causes significant losses, but according to this source and many others, refusal to follow orders leads to an execution in Wagner units. If this assault group fails, another one is sent until the position is secured. Then an assault group, which has managed to dig in, sends coordinates of the Ukrainian position to its artillery.
I mean, I guess that's why they're so
followed by artillery shelling of this position for several hours, after which another assault group joins with the previous group, which manages to dig in. Wagner usually prepares 4 assault waves on the...
So, like, even though it's crazy, it works and it's effective, and they're used to that style, and that's what they're trained into, and that's why they did seem like the most effective force whilst they were out on the field.
Same position, but according to this source, it took 14 waves to secure a position in one section of Soledar. This tactic has been working for Wagner so far, but it has caused big casualties among inmates recruited by Prigozhin, who are usually sent as attack waves. We will see if this tactic can be sustained by Wagner for long, especially given that Wagner no longer recruits from prisons, according to Prigozhin. Whether that is due to the unwillingness of inmates to join Wagner due to high casualties, or the decision of the Kremlin, we do not know. But if we take into consideration the leaked media guidelines of the Russian Ministry of Defense, which demands media outlets not to mention Prigozhin or Wagner, we can assume that Prigozhin is currently losing the political battle to Shoigu. It has also been claimed that the Russian Ministry of Defense plans to integrate the DPR and LPR forces, volunteer battalions, and other units fighting in Ukraine into its structure, arguably to have a higher degree of control over them. Finally, the claim of Ukrainian military intelligence that Gazprom is creating its own mercenary group, and rumors that now the Ministry of Defense is recruiting prisoners with military experience to the army
to their own
may indicate
forces.
that the Russian government is looking for an alternative to Wagner. A video where Wagner soldiers ask the Ministry of Defense for artillery shells demonstrates that their situation is not the greatest.
Nope.
What are the Russian goals on the battlefield at this point? We've dedicated an entire video to this subject already, so we'll not do a deep dive into it. To summarize, Russia will try to proceed with the Donbass front as its primary objective.
But they're still just not making any gains.
They will also actively seek to occupy Kupiansk, Liman, Bilohorivka, and other essential areas in the northern Donbass, and probe Ukrainian defenses there and in sections like Vuhledar on the Zaporizhian front to find an opening in the Ukrainian defense. At this point, another attack on Kyiv seems unlikely for the reasons we discussed in previous videos. The statement of the president of Belarus, Lukashenko, corroborated this. On February 16th, he stated that Belarus would enter the war only if there were aggression against it, and, to quote, "if even one soldier sets foot in Belarus to kill my people." But could Kharkiv re-emerge as a target of the Kremlin? Some indicators are pointing to that. It has been reported that Russia has re-established its military camps in Voronezh and Kursk oblasts, in the exact locations where Russian units were stationed on the eve of the war.
But is that just because it is a safe area for these HQ points to be? That could be it. Because again, do you really want to be opening up another front? Or do we all know that this area is safe? You're not going to put any HIMARS here, and these HQ points aren't going to be destroyed like all the other command points.
Both Kursk and Voronezh are relatively close to Kharkiv, and can once again be used as staging points for an attack on the second largest city of Ukraine. Furthermore, the head of the Russian-appointed Occupation Administration of Kharkiv Oblast, Vitaly Ganchev, claimed that Russia intends to recapture the areas of Kharkiv Oblast they lost earlier during the Ukrainian Izium counter-offensive. It is worth monitoring whether the Russians plan another attempt on Kharkiv in the foreseeable future, or on Sumy. According to Ukrainian sources, the Russian army has gathered more than 10,000 soldiers on the Russian border near Sumy, and has erected a field hospital there, which may indicate that the Russians are planning an offensive action on Sumy.
Job done. Perfect.
I don't think
so we have
it's a good idea opening up that area for an attack.
For now, Ukraine is defending. It would have to withstand the Russian pressure on 3 fronts before the Western armored support arrives, and can help Ukraine launch its counter-offensive sometime in spring or summer. Ukraine is currently recruiting its citizens to the Assault Guard, which will consist of assault brigades in the upcoming battles to liberate Crimea, Luhansk and Donetsk. According to Ukrainian officials, 17,000 Ukrainians have already signed up. But Ukraine still needs all the support it can get to launch a successful counter-offensive. Several notable developments have been related to military and economic support provided and pledged to Ukraine by its Western allies. On February 1st, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said they could consider providing military aid, including the Iron Dome air defense system. Japan promised $170 million for emergency reconstruction work in Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
On February 2nd,
interesting.
the EU delivered €500 million for the reform process in Ukraine, and sent 2,400 generators.
On the generators, 3rd, I understand.
The US announced another military aid package, including GLSDB, HIMARS, and M982 Excalibur munitions, artillery shells, heavy machine guns, 181 MRAP vehicles, 250 javelins, 2,000 anti-tank rockets, claymore mines, drones, equipment, radars, generators, and so on. Bloomberg reports that the realistic timeline for the arrival of GLSDB in Ukraine is 9 months. A few days later, US President Biden reiterated the unwavering American support to Ukraine for as long as they may need it.
Okay.
Also, on February 3rd, Germany approved the delivery of 178 Leopard 1 tanks and stated its intention to purchase 15 Gepard anti-aircraft guns for Ukraine. On February 4th, US Prosecutor General Merrick Garland approved the transfer of $5.4 million confiscated from the Russian propagandist Konstantin Malofeev to Ukraine. This is the first decision of its kind since the start of the war in Ukraine. On the same day, Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Costa reiterated that Portugal would send an unspecified number of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine.
Strong.
On February 6th, it was reported that Ukraine's Western allies thoroughly examined captured Russian equipment to conclude which components they would need to try to block from entering Russia to create problems for Russian weapon manufacturing.
I see.
On February 7th,
Reuters
reported that Switzerland is close to lifting the ban on weapon supply.
What limitations they have within their armory, so that they basically can say you can't resupply those parts that they've lost.
To Ukraine.
Smart.
Also on this day, Denmark pledged to deliver Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine, while the German Minister of Defense informed that Leopard 2A6 tanks would be given to Ukraine in late March. On February 8th, Zelensky travelled to London. British Prime Minister Sunak stated that Challenger 2 tanks would arrive in Ukraine in March. Zelensky reported that Britain has agreed to provide long-range weapons and armoured vehicles. Zelensky also delivered a speech in the House of Commons, calling on Britain for
Sunak, what are you doing? What sort of long-range weapons and delivery plans?
For freedom, for fighter jets.
Come on.
While the British made no commitments on this matter, one can sense that there is more and more momentum in delivering fighter jets to Ukraine. The British Prime Minister Sunak agreed to expand the program of Ukrainian soldiers to train pilots too. On February 9th, Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki stated their readiness to give fighter jets to Ukraine, but added that Poland would not be the first NATO country to take this step.
They can't be.
A few days later, the sources of the Financial Times claimed that the White House was considering the possible delivery of fighters to Ukraine. The mood of the Ukrainian Defense Minister Reznikov at the Brussels meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group also indicates the West is getting closer to sending fighters to Ukraine. The US Defense Secretary, Austin, stated at the meeting that the US and its allies would help the Ukrainian army to counterattack in the spring. This includes 8 countries: Germany, Poland, Canada, Portugal, Spain, Norway, Denmark, and the Netherlands, supplying Leopard tanks to Ukraine. The USA, Poland, and Czechia
didn't we cover this last episode
tanks,
though? Yeah.
While several countries would send air
so
defense.
This is all the same.
Predictably,
the same stuff
Russia
from the last video, right? Let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. What's down below.
As
it can't
the
be on
Russian
top of what they already
Britain
said they were going
warned
to
that
send.
delivery of British jets would have military and political consequences for the entire European continent.
Ooh.
These threats have been made for the last year,
yeah,
and
Putin,
sound
stop.
even more hollow each time
falling.
they are made. The rest of the military aid to Ukraine included 10,000 shells for Grad MLRS from Pakistan, Caesar self-propelled howitzers from Denmark, 20 BMP-1s from Greece, 2 more Iris-T air defense systems from Germany, Archer artillery systems, and more than 50 infantry fighting vehicles from Sweden.
Nice.
Germany is also in talks with Ukraine regarding the delivery of Panther main battle tanks, while Britain plans to launch military vehicle production in Ukraine. The February 9th decision of Musk's SpaceX to ban the satellite connection of Ukrainian drones to Starlink has been the main notable negative development for Ukraine in terms of Western support.
I was really interested by this.
It is unclear if this ban is for all Ukrainian drones, or only the ones used to attack deep into Russian territory. There were also several notable reports of foreign military support to Russia in this period.
In the comments box down below.
On February 5th, the
Wall
Street Journal claimed that Iran and Russia plan to build a plant manufacturing Shahed 136 drones. On February 9th, Putin instructed the Agency for Strategic Initiatives to support federal subjects in developing the manufacturing of drones.
Alright.
On February 13th, The Guardian reported that Iran delivered 18 long-range drones, 6 Mahajer-6 drones and 12 Shahed 121 and 129 drones.
Interesting.
Capable of striking and then returning to its base. Russia will need more drones to continue targeting Ukraine's critical civilian infrastructure.
And the risk with those is they will get shot down still.
Russia has not been
so
employing
even though they
this
can
tactic
return,
too
if they
often,
get shot down, they
there
can't.
still were several notable drone and missile attacks on Ukraine. On
Which
February
were?
2nd, a Russian missile destroyed an apartment building in Kramatorsk, killing at least 3 people. On February 10th, Russia launched 71 cruise missiles, including Kh-101, Kh-555, Caliber and S-300 missiles on Kyiv, Khmelnytsky, Dnipropetrovsk, Vinnytsia, Zaporizhia, Odessa, Mykolaiv, Poltava, Zhytomyr, Kirovohrad and Kharkiv oblasts.
Crazy.
The government confirmed that 2 Calibers were fired from the Black Sea and passed through Moldovan airspace. A few days later, Zelensky claimed that Russia was planning a coup d'etat to oust the pro-Western government of Moldova. Moldovan intelligence later confirmed this. Overnight, on February 10th to 11th and 15th to 16th, Russia conducted more attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure.
Was that actually
The
true?
good news for
Wait,
Ukraine
can't
is that
skip
it
past
seems
that.
like
Because that sounds like bullshit to me, and that sounds like Zelensky's making up bullshit to support his case. But if the own government's secret service had an investigation and confirmed that, that's crazy.
they are managing to
Or is
stabilize
that
the
bullshit
energy
as well? Are they
situation in
working
the country.
together? Is
On
Moldova
February
and
12th,
Ukraine working
the
together?
president of the Ukrainian nuclear power structure, Energoatom, Petro Kotin, stated that Ukraine had launched all of its 9 nuclear blocks, which would solve the issue of blackouts, at least in Odessa, Kyiv, Khmelnytsky and Zhytomyr oblasts. Overall, the Russian terror tactic of destroying Ukrainian energy infrastructure seems to have failed to reach its goals.
Nice. Strong.
Several noteworthy reports have
population
also
held
appeared
strong.
regarding the Russian economy and internal affairs. According to the Ministry of Finances, Russia's budget revenues dropped by 35%, while expenditure raised by 59% in the period between January 2022 and January 2023. This shows that sanctions against Russia may not have had an immediate effect, which Ukraine would have wanted, but it still hurts Russia's capacity to wage war. On February 6th, Putin signed a decree allowing Russian MPs and regional and municipal deputies not to publish their incomes publicly. In contrast, law enforcement agencies in Ukraine continued conducting anti-corruption raids in response to several corruption scandals.
That's what I think I mentioned
Heavy
that last
losses
episode.
are mounting for both sides. On February 3rd, an unnamed senior US official claimed almost 200,000 losses by Russia. On February 10th, the American official Celeste Wallander stated that Russia had likely lost half of its main battle tanks since the start of the war.
Who stated that? Because
On February 10th, the American official Celeste Wallander stated that Russia...
even the American forces reporting that, it's a bit difficult to say. That's an assumption. So you don't know what Russia has, really. You're only assuming if they've lost half of
its main battle tanks since the start of the war. On February 12th,
so
the
we
UK
don't know.
Ministry of
I don't know if
Defense
that number's
claimed
fair
that Russia
to say
lost
here.
up to 800 soldiers per day in February. To compare, in June and July 2022, the Russian daily losses were fewer than 200 people. There have been no recent credible reports on Ukrainian losses. According to the Oryx blog, the visually confirmed equipment losses for Russia as of February 17th are 1,733 tanks, 3,655 vehicles, 231 command posts and communication stations, 606 artillery pieces and vehicles, 175 multiple rocket launchers, 72 aircraft, 77 helicopters, and 192 drones. For Ukraine, these are 461 tanks, 1,337 vehicles, 8 command posts and communication stations,
So no
236 artillery pieces and vehicles,
Additional 9.
39 multiple rocket launchers,
Additional 2.
58 aircraft, 29 helicopters, and 76 drones.
Okay.
More videos on this topic are on the way, so make sure to subscribe and press the bell button to see them.
And you know you should be subscribed and press that bell icon. If you haven't already, head over to their page, that link's in the description box down below. Even if you just want to watch some of their newer video, go click on that link. If you enjoyed my reaction, you know what you need to do. You need to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. If you're looking forward to finishing this series before anyone else, head over to the Patreon, because that link's in the description box down below, where we're going to be putting this whole series on there first before we get onto the YouTube. You know what you need to do. Other than that, guys, I'm going to catch you in the next episode.